So here we are talking about the Wheel of Fortune. Oops, this one is here. The Wheel of Fortune is about cycles, is about destiny, is about karma, synchronicity, divine timing. And it's also about becoming aware of the patterns we keep repeating in our lives and being given an opportunity to change them. So sometimes the wheel appears when we suddenly realize, wait, am I really back here again, to an old pattern, to an old behavior, to an old situation? And it seems in that moment that we are not growing. But if we are noticing that we are repeating a pattern, that's growing. Because the thing about repeating a cycle with awareness is that in every cycle, we have a chance to do something differently and to be a little wiser than we were the previous time. Even when we find ourselves in a familiar situation or a behavior, the moment we notice it, we are not exactly the same person we were before. So each repetition allows us to see more clearly, ourselves, to see more clearly our patterns, our fears, and also the way we jeopardize our lives. So the Wheel of Fortune is absolutely not an easy energy because it brings uncertainty and change. It brings movement. And it's not easy, especially when we move farther from the center. Close to the edges, the Wheel of Fortune can be very chaotic because the wheel speeds faster. Emotions move faster, and we also might react fast to external circumstances. So we fall into old habits, old fears, old coping mechanism because it's messy. It's too messy, it's too fast, and it's too chaotic. But the closer we move to the center, and the more stillness and clarity and awareness and peace we can find. And during our life journey, sometimes without even realizing it, we move farther away from the wheel, too close to the edges. And we do that through stress, through poor self-care, or through self-sabotage, or unhealthy habits, or also try to avoiding what we need to face, because it's much easier living a life where we are not responsible for our own well-being and there is something or someone out there to blame. So much easier, right? And so when we move too closer to the edges, life tends to become messy enough that something eventually forces us to pay attention. Something happens that reminds us that we cannot continue anymore in the same direction forever. For example, if you see this card with the tower, it means that we are too close to the edges, that everything is messy, we're not taking care of ourselves, there is something going on, and something is going to happen in our lives that will force us to move back again to the center and to find balance. So if you don't take the responsibility to go to the center, life will help you, and it's not fun. It's usually a tower moment. You have also to understand that changing patterns is a gradual process and it's not linear. So it requires patience, requires awareness, and requires surrendering. So one of the meaning of the card, of the wheel, is surrendering. And it is so important, surrendering. Because sometimes we repeat the same cycle many times before we fully break it, and it's exhausting sometimes, especially if we are aware of it. It's so exhausting seeing ourselves in the same situation and say, how did I end up here? How is it possible, right? And it seems that we are failing, but often the old patterns existed because they wanted to protect us from something uncomfortable. They helped us to avoid fear or vulnerability or pain or uncertainty. And when we begin changing, all the things that we avoided, they resurface. And it's overwhelming because sometimes it's a lot. So when we are in that situation, we feel so overwhelmed that we desperately want to return to what once felt safe, even if it's not healthy for us. But each time we try to go back, each time we go back to that old pattern, old behavior, old situation, we find ourselves a little bit less comfortable in that. Because we know deep inside that we can no longer belong there. And so, again, be patient with yourself, have grace for yourself when you are repeating a cycle. You're not failing. It's just that this kind of healing is not linear and is not is gradual. Another meaning of the wheel is karma, is ancestral patterns, things passed through family, generations, and it asks, when it appears in this situation, it asks us to stop carrying a pattern that existed long before us, maybe before we were born, right? And so healing starts when we realize that, yes, that might be my past or the past of my family or my ancestors, but it's not anymore my future. It's not my future. My future will be different. And also this kind of healing sometimes go through cycles, and it's difficult and it requires a lot of patience too. So again, be graceful when you are moving also through these releasing ancestral patterns. Another meaning of the wheel is that it represents sometimes a moment of waiting, a period where life is moving but we don't fully know where it's taking us yet. So a period where surrender becomes necessary, because there are moments when we've done everything we can do and now we have to let life unfold in its own timing. We cannot do anything else. And that can be very uncomfortable. And so the wheel asks us to trust and be kind with ourselves, even if we cannot see the outcome, because we can't control the wheel or where the wheel lands, but we do have control over how we move through the experience. And we can move through this experience with acceptance and awareness, so moving more toward the center of the wheel, or we can move through this experience with resistance and chaos, so moving more toward the edges of the wheel. And that we can choose. That's in our power. We can do that. That's the only thing we have power on. For me, one of the deepest teaching of the wheel is remembering that nothing is permanent. So difficult moments are temporary, and beautiful moments are temporary too. So when life feels heavy, just remember that it will pass, it will transform, it will move. And also when life feels beautiful, allow yourself to be inside it fully while it's there, because also that will pass. Also happiness will pass. So the wheel keeps turning, and so do we. Let's talk a little bit about the shadow. Well, the shadow of the wheel is when we start believing that life will never truly change for us, that we begin life, seeing life as something that is fixed and stagnant, instead of recognizing that life is movement, life is unpredictable, and life asks us to move, to evolve, to transform. Or another thing can be that we have a deep resistance to change, that instead of flowing with the change of life, we just resist to it. Or also that we repeat a cycle without awareness, without really learning any lesson. And we start clinging to what's familiar, even if it's no longer healthy, because the unknown feels frightening to the nervous system, of course. But resisting change often creates far more unnecessary suffering and chaos than the change itself. The more tightly we try to control or hold into an old version of ourselves, of our life, the more tension, frustration, and inter-conflict we can create. So the Wheel of Fortune is an incredibly frustrating moment if we want to make it frustrating. It's in our power. We can surrender or we can get frustrated. We can be patient or we can just get anxious, right? But let's move to the imagery here. Let's start with the traditional one. This is the traditional one, and as you see, there are like 4 symbols at the corner. They are the four sign or fixed sign of the zodiac, but I see that mostly as the change of the season. I see that the 4th season, which is an amazing symbolism for change. The season, like, you know, spring that goes into summer, that goes into fall, that goes into winter, and the cycle starts again, and every cycle is never the same, right? Even nature learns. And then we have the one from the wild unknown, and this is so messy. If you see this Wheel of Fortune, it's like, this is getting messy. This is getting really messy. But as you see, there is color at the center. And so the wheel is asking you, if you move to the edges, everything will be darker and unbearable. But if you move toward the center, there are colors for you. Life is more colorful and you can enjoy more life, right? And I like also this one, there is the night and day. This is another beautiful symbolism for change, for like cycle, you know, the night and day, and how important both of them are, like the dark and the light. Beautiful. We wouldn't have the light without the dark, and vice versa. This one is for the Light Seers Tarot, and it's really, for me, it gives me the idea of surrendering to the cycles. Even if it's messy, even if it's hard, you're just surrendering. Look, it looks like a little bit of, you know, the Fool energy. Just surrendering, and the dice on the neck, as you can see. This one is also like, you know, trust that everything will work out at the end, you know? Everything will work out. Don't worry. In a way or another. Love that. And then the last one is from Pamela, the Infinite Door, Pamela Love Tarot deck. And this is like, can have 2 different meanings for me. There are also elements. This cat and the dog are very relaxed. They're like surrendering, right? They are really surrendering and not like complaining with everything happening. And instead, these hands holding the wheel can have 2 different meanings. That sometimes when the wheel is about you need to change patterns, you are in power. Your awareness, you know, is important. You are part of the change, right? and can also have a negative meaning, because sometimes instead it's kind of like you want to control. Sometimes when you have to surrender, when you cannot do anything more, you want to control, and controlling the wheel, it's not nice, because the wheel keeps speeding, right? And if you put your hands close to the wheel, you can hurt yourself, and it's just gonna be hurtful and not fun. So yeah, this is more or less, this is such a beautiful, okay, yeah, that's it. That's the wheel of fortune. Tell me if you have any ideas, if you have any different meanings. Tell me how you know, have you, if you had a moment where you really experienced the wheel of fortune. And like, comment, subscribe, support my work, you know, as you can. Bye.